Here's Johnny!
Jack Nicholson is one of the greatest actors of all time. His wild man energy and charisma have been entertaining us for decades.
You know what I mean? Is that it? Is that crazy enough for you? Want me to take a shit on the floor?
Of course, we all know the classics he's remembered for, like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, The Shining, Batman. But what about those more obscure, forgotten gems that further solidify the claim that he is in the elite of actors? In this video, we're going to take a look at 5 of Jack Nicholson's most criminally underrated and overlooked movies. The King of Marvin Gardens. This is by far one of the most underrated movies of the 70s, and I would actually say of all time, to be honest. Jack Nicholson was already experimenting back here, playing a reserved, shy loner in contrast to his overly confident, charismatic brother, played by Bruce Dern. The King of Marvin Gardens tells the story of David Stabler, a reclusive late-night radio host who is called out to Atlantic City by his unpredictable brother, Jason, for the opportunity to apparently make a fortune. David wonders whether maybe this time will be different, so he goes out to see his brother, and from there the crazy scheme begins to unravel. Nicholson is fantastic as David. He shows he can nail these quiet roles as well. Jack doesn't always have to play a nutcase, guys, I promise. He conveys a lot of pain behind David's eyes. The character has a clear longing to believe in his brother, but a lifetime of disappointment has left him disillusioned, largely due to his brother's constant ill-fated schemes. Broadcasting to his late night audience at the start of the movie, David shares stories of his childhood. It's kind of sad to see that David is basically treating his radio show as a therapy session, but fascinating to watch nonetheless.
I promised that I would tell you why I never eat fish.
This is an incredibly honest film about regret, the passage of time, and delusions of grandeur. The film unrelentingly presents messed up characters who are actually pretty likeable because their dilemma is sympathetic. They are simply lost people and you can't really be angry at them despite how annoying they can be. Bruce Dern is a charisma machine as Jason. He's a blast to watch, but also a pretty tragic character because you can see how much he has brought into his own nonsense. He's too far gone. But there was once a wide-eyed good person in there. Now he's just an old swindler holding on to the past. This is a fascinating film. It's so entertaining to watch the world views of the two brothers clashing. It's a fantastic back and forth between Nicholson and Dern.
Jason, will you wake up for 1 minute? Will you open your eyes? Open your ears!
More people need to watch The King of Marvin Gardens. It's well made, well written, pulls at your heartstrings, has a great Nicholson performance, and never strays away from its painful central message that sometimes things don't turn out how you always hoped, and that the desire to force them to might be the very thing that destroys you. 5 Easy Pieces. This was Jack Nicholson's second collaboration with Bob Rafelson, and it tells the story of Bobby Dupay, a disillusioned oil rig worker who struggles with his past, his family, and societal norms and expectations. This film left a real impact on me, and I think it's one of the best, if criminally underseen, Nicholson works. Bobby Dupay is one of Nicholson's most complex characters. Initially he just feels like a bit of a jerk as he treats his supposed girlfriend, Rayette, played by Karen Black, pretty bad, and he's just a rude person in general. However, as the film goes on and he goes to visit his family, we see there's an internal conflict there. He's torn between his working class life and his family's expectations and opinions of him. Nicholson's performance is raw, captivating and full of charisma, and was really the first of his patented wild man roles, also known as roles where he plays a nutter. But to be fair, Bobby Dupay isn't a nutter, he just shows brief instances of being slightly unhinged.
You want me to hold the chicken, huh?
I want you to hold it between your knees.
I think perhaps the piano scene is more well known than the film itself. Basically, Bobby decides to start playing a piano during a traffic jam. See, I told you he was a bit nuts. It's a fun yet powerful scene. It represents Bobby's desire for escapism and communicates to the audience he has skills he never chased, making him a very relatable character, as many of us also of course have untapped potential. It's also just a great Nicholson wild man moment, a real standout scene showing his charisma and energy. Nicholson lays it all on the line in the scene when he is speaking to his estranged father, who is now very ill and mute. You can tell Bobby is trying to make sense of years of unsaid things and the lack of relationship they have had. It's a heartbreaking scene, one of the greatest moments in the film. It shows us Bobby has a heart underneath all the bravado, and that Jack Nicholson of course is a stunning actor who can reel it in when he needs to.
Are you alright?
I don't know what to say.
Five Easy Pieces really is a masterpiece. Rob Rafelson clearly deeply understood the struggling working man of the 1970s. And it's one of Nicholson's best performances, and he proved very early on he was one of the greatest actors on planet Earth. It is a film that goes there and pushes the envelope. It doesn't shy away from showing the fact that the world can be a dirty, disappointing place, but at the same time, I get the feeling the film doesn't believe all humanity is evil and beyond redemption. It's just that Bobby Dupay, along with the vast majority of us, let's be honest, is deeply flawed. Did you know that in 1981, Jack Nicholson actually made a western alongside none other than Marlon Brando? Directed by Arthur Penn, this obscure movie is well worth watching. Missouri Breaks follows a group of horse thieves and their eventual encounter with a ruthless hired gun, played by Brando. These are of course two of the greats, so seeing Nicholson and Brando together on screen in the West is kind of a film fan's dream, especially looking back to this era of Hollywood. Nicholson plays a character named Tom Logan. He's charming but unpredictable and morally ambiguous. He's a thief and certainly not your conventional Western protagonist. On the other hand, Brando's character of Lee Clayton is an absolute fruitcake. He's mysterious and eccentric, and the performance is a stark contrast to Nicholson, who puts in a serious no-nonsense take as Brando camps it up. It's again strange to see Nicholson as the reserved one, another example of him not always having to play the wild man in order to deliver. This is one of those westerns that had zero loyalty to what we knew of the genre. In fact, it takes the western genre and shoots it in cold blood. Arthur Penn was not the first to do this, but he intended to burn the western down and reinvent it. It's nothing like the old school westerns we know. There's no real heroes or villains, everyone is cruel and ruthless, and there is absolutely no mercy and barely any justice. There's also no traditional shootouts, instead kills are executed by sneaking up from behind, or when a person is at their most vulnerable. There's a lack of humanity and honour, and some critics called the Missouri Breaks excessive. But if I'm honest, I actually enjoy these sorts of westerns. This is probably closer to what actually happened back then anyway. Traditional westerns have their place and are great, but these savage horrible ones I really enjoy watching too. The Missouri Breaks isn't a perfect western and it can be a bit slow moving, but to see these two screen legends going back and forth in quite a unique film is definitely worth checking out. It's also a very funny film at times, and that humour arrives in the midst of tragedy, so that's another way this film challenges western conventions, encouraging us to laugh at things we perhaps shouldn't. Marlon Brando is hilarious in the film and fairly over the top.
Get your gun and you start shooting and banging around. What good would it do you? Wouldn't do a damn bit of good. They'd all leave and they'd be back by 7:30 in the morning.
Nicholson and Brando also apparently didn't get along on set, with Nicholson taking exception to Brando's improvising and ever-changing accent. I do agree the main issue with the film is Brando. He seems to be making it up as he goes along, but despite that fact I still think he puts in a great performance. It's just some of the choices are a bit out there. But hey, who does that sound like later in their career? Yep, none other than Jack Nicholson himself. Wolf. Jack Nicholson runs around as a werewolf. Now we're talking. This movie is completely and utterly bonkers, but it's really great. 1994's Wolf follows an aging senior editor, Will Randall, who gets bitten by a wolf, and after that, his life changes forever. This has become a cult movie over the years, as back in 1994, audiences didn't really know what to make of it, because to be honest, it's a movie that doesn't fit into a specific genre. It's not strictly a horror film, nor is it a thriller. It's kind of a unique blend of both of them, as well as being pretty self-aware and humorous. Wolf again didn't fit the mould of traditional Nicholson roles. As I've mentioned, he often played the eccentric outsider or lovable wild man anti-hero. In this movie, he plays a wealthy book editor who is struggling to come to terms with his own mortality. It's a performance that's both grounded, thoughtful and introspective. But it's a Jack Nicholson film, isn't it? So if he's not going to go nuts, someone else has to be. The award for most bonkers performance in Wolf goes to none other than James Spader, who plays a great villain. He handles all the scenery chewing, and so Jack isn't required to go over the top to make this werewolf movie fun. And so he takes that opportunity to give us a deep performance within this crazy premise. Wolf has a lot more going for it than people initially gave it credit for at the time. It examines the classic idea of what makes us human, and how we adjust to aging and the passage of time. It's also a film about primal instincts and discusses how much of humanity is pure animal, Can we control this integral part of who we are, or should we just let it roam free and take us over? And while the special effects may be dated, they add to the film's charm, reminding us of that classic 90s era. The practical effects and makeup are still pretty impressive to this day, and it's pretty undeniable that Wolf is full of unsettling visuals and a visceral, nerve-wracking atmosphere. The premise is fun, Nicholson shows his range, there's good tension, an icy atmosphere, crazy scenes you won't soon forget, and a few themes that might actually leave you still thinking about the film long after seeing it. Not bad for a werewolf movie. Hofer. Did you know Jack Nicholson once played the infamous Jimmy Hofer? Believe it or not, Danny DeVito teamed up with Nicholson and directed this forgotten biopic back in 1992. Hofer often gets lost in the shuffle among Nicholson's impressive body of work, but there's no doubt it deserves way more attention. Hofer was in fact a passion project for Jack, who was heavily interested in bringing this story to the big screen. Unsurprisingly, Jack puts in a powerhouse performance as Jimmy Hofer, the incredibly iconic American Labour Union leader. Jack's turn as Hofer is incredibly passionate and heartfelt, dripping with earnest enthusiasm. He completely embodies this person who completely shook up American politics in the 60s and 70s, much like Jack did with Hollywood in the 70s and 80s. The film is an incredibly loyal and in-depth portrayal, and I dare say maybe too much so, because at the time this film went over a lot of people's heads, and that was perhaps because Nicholson and DeVito were so focused on being accurate they forgot to appeal to mainstream audiences too. The movie is a fascinating look back at 1960s and 70s American politics, and I guess if you're not interested in that, it could end up boring because it's pretty to the point and realistic, instead of taking the more glamorous and sensationalist direction it could have to get a more mainstream appeal.
I never benefited $1 from the loans made by the pension fund. Loans that made profits for the union. And what is wrong with that?
However, there is lots to enjoy if you give the film a chance. It's very authentic and it does genuinely feel like you were transported back in time, witnessing actual events, how they really happened. It's got some great back and forth arguments between the characters and you believe every word. The dialogue is very from the heart and the actors put their all into these moments. There's lots of emotion and genuinely biting dialogue.
You don't impress me, and your office don't impress me, and your family don't impress me. Bunch of rum runners. And I don't need $300 million, and my brother elected president to whop your fucking ass, you slimy little prick. I beat your ass that trumped up charge down south. I'm gonna beat you again.
Everyone involved really seemed to care about giving us the definitive Jimmy Hofer story. And nothing is whitewashed. We are exposed to every side of Jimmy and everything he went through. And because of that, the film is very raw and intense, and I respect them for being as thorough and honest as they were. I can't think of many actors who could have delivered a better Jimmy Hofer portrayal than Jack. This is classic Nicholson, but at the same time it's very accurate to Hofer's real-life mannerisms. So it walks that fine line of being accurate to the character, but still giving us some classic Nicholson flair. Hofer really is an underappreciated Nicholson gem. With its thought-provoking themes, historical significance and incredible performances, I really do think it deserves more praise. It may not be perfect, but it's a very solid 90s biopic. Have you seen any of these Nicholson underrated gems? Let me know in the comments, and if not, these are essential films, so definitely check them out, as it's kind of criminal that so many films of one of the greatest actors of all time have been forgotten. Thanks for watching, please consider subscribing if you enjoy analysis and retrospectives for passionate movie geeks, and I will see you guys next time.